Good afternoon, and welcome today to today's Jewish Policy Center webinar. I am Shoshana Bryan, Senior Director of the JPC, and your host. So news is never all good or all bad, but today we're sort of celebrating for more than one reason. First, because Israel has removed terrorists and at least some of their weapons from Gaza and from Lebanon. The more they do of that, the better off Israel and the other people of the region are. And that's part of what we're going to talk to our guest today, Hussain Abdul Hussain, about. But there's a second reason to celebrate. Israel, it appears, has had enough of living not only with the threat of rocket attacks, but with actual rocket attacks for the last 11 months. 9,000 or more rockets and missiles. Taking matters into its own hands means ignoring American demands for de-escalation, diplomacy, and restraint, and speaking the language that its enemies speak, which is, if you attack me, you will pay. So I wish the U.S. government would take a lesson here. Our enemies are not looking for conversation, except as a delaying mechanism to allow themselves more time to acquire weapons, more time to fire weapons, and more time to create a rift between Israel and the United States. When I invited Hussain to join us today, I was thinking about regional Arab reaction to Israel's foray into Gaza, frankly. Now, having seen video clips of Arabs in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and in Iran cheering and passing out sweets to celebrate the demise of Hezbollah's Nasrallah, which look amazingly, by the way, like cheering and celebrations in Israel over the same issue, Hussain has a much broader canvas to paint on. He's listening across the Arab world. He knows what they're saying, he knows what they're thinking, and he's going to let us in on some of it. Now, before we go to Hussain, your JPC commercial. The Jewish Policy Center was established in 1985 as a nonprofit organization providing analysis of foreign and domestic policies. We support a strong American defense capability, U.S.-Israel security cooperation, and missile defense. Most important today, we support the legitimacy and security of the government of Israel as it acts to protect its people within its borders and beyond its borders. And we're still supporting justice in Gaza, meaning the return of the hostages. As an organization that sits slightly to the right of center, JPC advocates for small government, low taxes, free trade, fiscal responsibility, energy security, free speech, and intellectual diversity. You can find us on our website, jewishpolicycenter.org. That's jewishpolicycenter.org. You can read our insight articles, our magazine In Focus Quarterly, and you can binge watch all the previous webinar programs, get a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and see where we've been for the last couple of years. And now our guest. Hussain Abdul Hussain is a research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He focuses on the Gulf region and Yemen, including on Gulf relations with Iran and Gulf peace with Israel. Born and raised in Beirut, Baghdad, and Baalbek, which is a great list of places to be, cities that have been at the center of major Middle East events. Hussain earned a degree in history and archaeology from the American University in Beirut. He worked as a reporter and later managing editor at Beirut's Daily Star newspaper, and he's reported from war zones on the Lebanese border with Israel and from Iraq. In Washington, Hussain helped to set up and manage the Arab satellite network, Al-Hura Iraq, after which he headed the Washington bureau of the Kuwait daily Al-Ra'i. I hope I said that right, Hussain. Al-Ra'i.
That's correct.
He's been a visiting fellow at London's Chatham House, and he has published in English in the New York Times and the Washington Post. And he is like the only person in the New York Times and the Washington Post that you should be reading. Forget the rest of them. He publishes in Arabic in various publications. And he's been quoted just about everywhere you think he should be, and he is a frequent commentator on major Arabic satellite networks. Before Hussain went to FTD, he and I met on Twitter, which is like using a dating service. You don't really know who you're talking to. But then we met, and he has written for In Focus Quarterly, and he's been on webinars with us before. His article, Why There Is No Palestinian State, which is, I think, 2 years old now, in Focus Quarterly, is a must-read. You can find it on our website, jewishpolicycenter.org, under publications. And now, Hussain Abdul Hussain, tell us what we need to know. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Shoshana, and always pleasure. Thank you, JPC and the audience, everyone who's tuned in. Well, as Shoshana told you, and maybe you already know that, Israel has killed Hezbollah's chief of 32 years, Hassan Nasrallah. He's been one of the most outspoken, charismatic, and opponents of Israel over the past decades. Um, Israel killed Nasrallah on Friday. Now, let me just quickly construct a timeline for you to understand the quick effect of such an event. On Tuesday, before Nasrallah was killed, we, the United States, were conducting diplomacy to bring this war to an end between Israel and Hezbollah. And the person who represents Hezbollah, even though he's not in Hezbollah, is the Speaker of Lebanon's parliament. His name is Nabih Berri. He's also Shia like Hezbollah, and he's, so to speak, the junior partner of Hezbollah. So we went to Berri. We offered him an offer. We said, if Hezbollah stops, Israel stops. No conditions, no questions asked. And Berri came out and said, Lebanon will only stop fighting. Hezbollah will only the war in Gaza ends. So this was the obstacle that has been keeping a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. On Friday, as we've said, Israel took out Nasrallah. Yesterday, Nabih Berri received the acting prime minister, a Sunni guy in Beirut. His name is Najib Mikati. And the readout between the two men showed that they have a position on what's going on. And they said, well, if it's war, we commit to abiding by UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which ended the 2006 war between the two sides. And this includes, so to speak, disbanding Hezbollah, a ceasefire, deployment of the Lebanese army to the borders between the two countries, and also deployment of a UN peacekeeping force of 10,000 soldiers known as UNIFIL. Remarkably, neither Berri nor Mikati said a word about Gaza. And there was not a week had elapsed between the two positions. This is just a quick preview how these two Lebanese officials abandoned tying Lebanon to Gaza only a day or two after Nasrallah was killed. The reason I'm telling you this is because the people who are savvy, Nabih Berri has been the longest serving speaker on the face of the planet, and he's been elected fair and square. So this gives you an idea how savvy this person is and how he has his finger on the pulse, so to speak. He understands things. He can predict things. So it seems that Berri now understands that Hezbollah is no more, that it's weakened substantially. And now he has room to step up and grab Lebanon out of war and go to a ceasefire or whatever arrangement he can get. Now, the point here is that the average Lebanese has not realized that. So the majority of the Lebanese who hate Nasrallah like the plague have not yet come out. We've seen thousands, maybe tens of thousands, celebrating the death of Nasrallah in northern Syria. The reason why this happens in northern Syria is this is the part of Syria that Assad and Hezbollah do not control. We've seen Arabs celebrate the death of Nasrallah in newspapers, pundits, experts. I read at least a dozen op-eds by prominent columnists, all of them celebrating the demise of this man. So, of course, on the other side, Iran and Iraq and the media that supports the Islamist Iran regime. I mean, these guys, as expected, they were eulogizing him and they were feeling sad for him. Now, here's a remarkable tidbit. This morning, I opened the Hezbollah newspaper in Beirut, and I was reading them, and apparently they've been monitoring the U.S. mainstream media, and they had all kinds of praise to the New York Times and to the Washington Post for their obituary about Nasrallah. So imagine that. We have the Arab columnist who expressed gratitude that Nasrallah was taken out. And you have the US mainstream media feeling not so thrilled about Nasrallah being taken out. Now, how will this play out in Lebanon and the region? Um, Nasrallah was a significant player not only in Lebanon, he was very high up on the chain of command of the IRGC, the Islamic Republican Guard Corps. This is the main militia, the mainstay of the Islamist Iran regime underneath the supreme leader himself, Ali Khamenei. So Nasrallah was also conducting operations, or was at least guiding, supervising, training, arming, you name it. The militias, the Iranian proxies in Iraq, in Syria, and in Yemen. One great step that Israel had taken before eliminating Nasrallah was that it had eliminated everyone who was underneath Nasrallah. Everyone from number 2 to number 30 was taken out, except for number 4, I guess, Ali Karaki. And Ali Karaki was meeting with Nasrallah when Israel took him out. Now, what we know is that Israel was aware that Hezbollah had come to Beirut. He was not in Beirut at the time. After the decision was taken, Israel started tracking him and waited 4 days before taking him out. Now we know why. They were waiting for this senior officials meeting. And in this strike, the airstrike that took down 6 buildings, guess how many people were killed? 6. And all of them, in addition to Nasrallah, of course, Nasrallah and 5 other people, all of them were senior Hezbollah people. One of them was one of the top IRGC generals, the Iranian general, who was sitting with Nasrallah, planning how to spread the war further beyond Lebanon, maybe to Syria, how to get Yemen to strike Israel. Before Israel killed Nasrallah, also Israel had killed a few of the top Hezbollah generals. These included the ones who they said they call them the ones in charge of the missile force, of the explosive drones force. These are the guys who trained the Yemenis, the Houthis in Yemen, on how to use explosive drones and ballistic missiles and to throw them not only on Israel, but also on Saudi Arabia, the UAE, whoever they don't like. And now, as you know, they're targeting international shipping. I think this morning they hit a British ship and 2 other ships, Danish ships, German ships, even sometimes Russian ships, to the extent that made Russia and China unhappy, saying, you know, we're on your team and you're hitting us. But now that Nasrallah is taken out, I think the RGC, they'll face a setback. Until now, the RGC have not managed to replace Qasem Soleimani, whom President Trump took out a few years back. And likewise, I don't think they'll be able to replace Nasrallah. And taking out these personalities weakens them significantly. And we can see that on their readiness, on their abilities, on their expansion, training, fighting, you name it. What will happen next? Now, you probably heard yesterday, Israel had a few small incursions into Lebanese territory. What Israel is trying to do in Lebanon is to push Hezbollah fighters a distance that's far enough to prevent these fighters from using anti-tank missiles. These are handheld. And what the Hezbollah fighters do is that they hold these missiles, they shoot them, and they can steer them as they are on the air. And they hit Israelis. And they've killed at least, I think, 12, 15 Israelis, both civilian and soldiers. So this is the direct threat on the Israeli north. And Israel is trying to push Hezbollah. The range of this handheld anti-tank missile is 5,500 meters, 5.5 K, roughly 3.5 miles. So Israel wants to push these guys. Maybe it'll establish a no man's land zone, sort of a buffer zone. No one lives in this buffer zone. Just make sure that there's enough distance for Hezbollah not be able to threaten the Israeli communities at the border. The operation has just started, so we're not sure how long this will take, or we're not sure even that Israel will push as far as 4 miles, 5 miles, 8 miles. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But whatever Israel does, this will not be easy. I think, Israel will be fighting long and hard, like it did in Gaza. There's the elite Hezbollah fighters, Radwan force. They're entrenched in that part. And of course, before I came here, you probably heard Iran is preparing a ballistic missile attack on Israel. So this story is unfolding. Now we've heard that they will not use explosive drones like they did the last time. This time it'll be only ballistic missiles. It takes 15 minutes or less, 12 to 15 minutes for these missiles to hit Israel. These missiles cannot be shot down by fighter jets like last time when the US, UK, and Israeli fighter jets shot down the drones. These can only be intercepted by the air defense systems, Patriot, THAADs, Iron Dome, any combination of those. So as we watch things unfold and we prepare for a possible invasion, incursion, whatever you want to call it, I think the war is still going on. But Israel is doing a magnificent job. I think it has outperformed Hezbollah and Iran by a mile.
That's a good wrap up of what we're seeing. I have to tell everybody who's watching us, there's this tendency for both of us to look to the side today and see if there's something on the computer that pops up that hadn't popped up at noon. But so far we're in the same space. Okay, so I have a couple of questions here from people. If you have questions, Q&A function on your Zoom, I'm monitoring. Hussain is monitoring. So if you have a question, send it in. But we have a couple to start with. People have talked about what Israel needs to do or could do in the south of Lebanon. And it seems to me that one of those things is remove the missile arsenal. Hezbollah, as we understand it, has an enormous arsenal. Now, if they don't have launchers and they don't have soldiers, maybe that doesn't mean as much. But it seems to me essential to get those missiles out of southern Lebanon. One of the things that's in the way often when you try to do that is the civilian population. So have the civilians left? Are they listening to the IDF, who is telling them to leave and to go north? Are they being held in place by Hezbollah and its friends? How hard is it going to be to reach the spaces where the missiles are?
So just to answer your question about the displaced, the Lebanese who've left, I think the population has been thinned out. It's been a while now. The south is mostly depopulated. I just cited the number of 6 people who got killed when 6 buildings were brought down when Nasrallah was killed. The reason this happened was because the population of the southern suburb, the stronghold of Hezbollah, has also left. So now they're living all over Lebanon. Now, mind you, the Gaza Strip is 365 square kilometers. Lebanon is 10,500. Just for you to get a sense of the difference of density in population. So the Lebanese can move around. In Gaza, they can't really move that much, and Hamas is dug underneath them. In Lebanon, the scene is, thankfully, the landscape is different, which has kept the civilian casualties at this point lower than the number of Hezbollah casualties since Hezbollah started this war on Ukraine. Now to your question about the missiles. There are 2 kinds of missiles. The big ones that they have to use launchers, these treat all of Israel the same. So it doesn't matter where you are. If you're in South Lebanon or North Lebanon, if you're in Iraq or if you're in Yemen, once you have a missile and a launcher and you fire it at Israel, it goes on toward Israel. And the way for Israel to intercept it is to have one of its air defense systems, Iron Dome, or the bigger ones, David Sling, to shoot it down, to try to shoot it down before it gets to civilian population. The threat that I was talking about in South Lebanon, that's a totally different threat, and it's the anti-tank missile. So these are a different weapon. They are handheld. These were used excessively in 1973 when Syria and Egypt invaded Israel on Yom Kippur War. And the Egyptians used this to decommission so many Israeli tanks during that war. So this is an old technology. It has a relatively long range, and you can use it against tanks, but you can also use it against people. And the Hezbollah fighters have been using this against people, and this is a significant threat to the Israeli civilian population. And this is why the north, the Israeli north, got depopulated, not because of the big rockets, which the Iron Dome can deal with. And anyway, big rockets can hit the north, they can hit Haifa, they can hit Tel Aviv, they can hit Eilat. So there's no point of moving the people in the north anywhere else in Israel. But the immediate threat is this. And there's another threat in South Lebanon, which is similar to what happened on October 7. Anyone who's been to that part of the world would understand that communities live very close, in close proximity to one another on either side of the border, and there's also only one fence between them. So if we judge by October 7, if there's ever a repeat of October 7, Hezbollah can just overrun the fence and find itself in the middle of Israeli civilian communities. So these two factors are the factors that are prompting Israel to try to push, to go into South Lebanon and push the Hezbollah fighters north, maybe create a buffer zone with a no man's land. But the bigger rockets are not part of the calculus here. So Israel understands that even if it pushes this kind of threat, the other kind of threat is part of the bigger context, the bigger war with Iran, the Islamist regime, and the IRGC.
So you said something about a ground attack and the possibility of a Hezbollah ground attack against Israel. So it seems that there was a plan for an attack on October 7th into the Galilee by Hezbollah. And presumably Israel learned about that, and that was one of the things that determined the timing. What can you tell us about that attack? I mean, they seem to have some pretty serious plans there.
So the footage and the video and the still images that we saw this morning from yesterday's Israeli raid into Hezbollah territory, there seems to be an enormous amount of ammunition and weapons and all kinds of what they need for a long battle. And it seems that these are connected. These arms depots are connected through tunnels. So Hezbollah is dug in and they're ready for a long war, much more ready, much readier than Hamas. So Hamas just exploded out of Gaza, burst out of Gaza into Israeli territory. Then Israel pushed them back, but the tunnels were not at the border. The tunnels of Hezbollah of Hamas, were inside of Gaza. In this case, the tunnels are right on the border. This is a significant threat. Israeli reports indicate that Hezbollah had a plan, maybe in the past, maybe now, maybe for the future. We're not sure, but they can inflict the same damage, even more, that the Hamas inflicted on October 7. These communities in the north, they're really vulnerable to Hamas, to Hezbollah, and anyone who knows the landscape knows that. Not only that, in the south, the landscape is more of a desert. So you can see really the fighters when they come in and out. In the north, it's valleys and hills and mountains and forests. And so if there's an infiltration and Hezbollah fighters get to hide in one of these valleys or forests, I think the war would be much, much bloodier and costlier for Israel. And I think this is what Israel is trying to preempt from happening again.
So they learned something from October 7th, which is get rid of it before it happens. One of the scary things to me was seeing the Hezbollah tunnels in the rocks. I mean, these guys were tunneling right through mountains and, under things you can't see. So I think maybe the IDF concluded, and the US tried to talk them out of it, but maybe the IDF has concluded the only way to get rid of these things is to go there physically and do it to them. So one can hope that they're doing it to them. So I said the magic word, right? Which is the US. We're going to talk about Iran in a minute. We're going to talk about the US and Iran in a minute. But what did Lebanese people, I understand what you're saying, that not all the Lebanese people have quite assimilated everything that's happened so far, and some people are ahead of other people. But what did it seem like to them when the United States said, de-escalate, diplomacy, let's not have this war? And the Israelis said, no, we're having this war. How do the people of Lebanon see the US when it tries to get Israel to not get rid of Hezbollah in their midst?
Well, had the Lebanese had enough trust in the US, then I think they'd have abandoned Hezbollah a long time ago. I think one of the reasons why the anti-Hezbollah Lebanese are not out of the closet is that because they always think that if they do come out of the closet, it's very likely that Washington will cut a deal with Iran anytime and throw them under the bus. So this kind of inconsistency does not only inflict damage on our standing in Lebanon, it does in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all the other allies. No one wants to be allied to an inconsistent ally. If they bet on the US has to deliver. What's been happening is that they bet on the US talks to Iran, then the US abandons them, and then they're stuck in the middle of nowhere fighting Iran by themselves. So this is what has inhabited these groups from coming out against Iran and its militias.
Well,
now,
to some extent, they're right.
Yeah.
You've seen people get killed in the Gaza Strip for trying to work with the Israelis or distribute food properly or being anti-Hamas. So I suppose the Lebanese people are right. It's dangerous to come out.
True, and so many times I think there's a big fault. There's a big problem with the U.S. foreign policy, in addition to inconsistency, is that we have stopped to perceive of war as a tool in our foreign policy. It's become an end by itself. So now we're talking about de-escalation day and night, as if our goal in the world is to de-escalate things, not to defend ourselves. So to defend ourselves, we cannot de-escalate. To defend ourselves, we have to get out the big guns and to take on our enemies. And I'm not saying that we have to start wars. I'm saying in case the enemies attack us, like they did Israel on October 7th, Hamas on October 8th, Hezbollah, when they attack, we have to be ready. So the point here is that the U.S. administration, this U.S. administration, has been so averse to uttering the word war that when Israel started going, Israel announced that it was shifting its military weight from the south to the north and started turning up the heat on Hezbollah. One of the statements that came out of the administration was that we understand Israel's escalation in order to reach de-escalation. Now, this is a surreal statement, What they meant to say, we understand that Israel is warring to restore deterrence. I mean, that's what it means. But there's an obsession with avoiding war and with de-escalation that they stop making sense. Now, back to Lebanon in a specific way, the huge mistake that we made in Lebanon is that over the past 10 months, our diplomacy tried to impress on Israel to accept Nasrallah's demand. So if you don't know what Nasrallah's demand, when Nasrallah started the war on October 8th, he said this is a war in support of Gaza, and this war will only stop when Israel stops the war in Gaza. So this is bad because if Israel ever conceded to Nasrallah's demand, this would have given Hezbollah, and by extension Iran, a say over the sovereignty of the state of Israel. From that point on, whatever Israel does, if Nasrallah doesn't like it, he can just start shooting missiles and say, okay, I won't stop until you do this or that. So what Washington did was that Washington started encouraging Israel to accept the ceasefire in Hamas, and to the extent that we were so dumb that we told the Israelis, well, you'll take 2 ceasefires for one. You stop two wars with one ceasefire. So they said, if you stop in Gaza, Nasrallah also will stop. That will solve 2 problems for you. This was a disaster. Even if Israel reached a ceasefire with Hamas, the war with Hezbollah should have continued to tell Nasrallah that you don't decide this thing. We stop when we decide. We stop with you. You have no say over Gaza.
Well, there's a misunderstanding at more than one level here. The U.S. is pushing for ceasefires, but ceasefires are not the end of a war. Ceasefire simply means that somebody stops shooting until somebody starts shooting. And not that I need to tell this audience or you. There was a ceasefire in place on October 6, 2023. There was a ceasefire until there wasn't a ceasefire. So this whole concept of ceasing fire is a temporary measure. Sometimes it's worthwhile. In World
And
War
there was a
One,
ceasefire in November also. There was an exchange.
yes.
So there was another ceasefire that Hamas broke.
Well, but see, that one actually was worthwhile for Israel, a short pause to get back some hostages. But that was a moment when Hamas believed that Israel was really going to come and kill them all, and which ultimately it did, but not as fast as Israel wanted to. So ceasefires are not the answer to the question. And defensive action is not always the answer to the question. I will point out that General Eric Kurilla, who is the CENTCOM commander, hanging out in the Red Sea and visiting Israel many, many times, actually sent a message back to his boss in the Pentagon, to Secretary Austin and to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that U.S. policy in the Red Sea of shooting down Houthi drones and missiles was not sufficient, that the United States needed to take forward action against the Houthis because that's how you get them to stop doing it. Apparently, his bosses weren't terribly interested in what he said because we're not doing it. But Israel is doing it. So now you have Israel taking out Houthi assets. You have Israel taking out Hezbollah assets. You have Israel taking out Hamas assets. And so all that's left is Iran. And you know this conversation has to get around to Iran at some point. Iran's been the puppet master. Mostly. It hasn't gotten itself specifically very much involved. And the last time it did, when it fired at Israel, there was an interesting coalition that included Saudi Arabia and Jordan, as well as the United States and Great Britain, on Israel's side. So a couple of questions arise. Is Iran likely to get involved this time militarily because it no longer has proxy assets that work for it in the way they used to? And secondly, do you think that Jordan and Saudi Arabia will do the same thing they did last time? Are they on the right side of the ledger at the moment? And then later I'm going to ask you another question about Jordan that someone sent in.
Okay, so to start from the second part, the last time the participation of Saudi Arabia will be the same as this time. The Saudis did not really intercept, but because everyone is integrated into CENTCOM, so their radars feed into the central command, and this allows Israel to make use of their radars in seeing what's coming in from Iran. Jordan last time participated in shooting down drones, but in this attack, if there are no drones, then you wouldn't need the fighter jets. So this time, if Jordan has the Patriot missiles, I'm not sure whether they do, but they can use these before the Iranian missiles reach Israel. I don't think the Saudis have any part to do. They probably have the same, like last time. The radars are working at all times, like everybody else. To your point on Houthis and the way we're handling this, I think Israel has presented a model that should rewrite the handbook of how to fight an asymmetric war. And this is basically to go after the head of the organization and the senior leadership. And I think unfortunately, we refuse to do that in Yemen. And I've seen in the New York Times quoting a senior U.S. official saying that we're scared that if we do that, and then things will escalate in the region, and we'll go into a bigger war. And I'm thinking, how worse can it get? I mean, the Houthis are already shooting down ships. So what should happen for us to think, okay, now it's time to draw a line in the sand? Had we gone after the chiefs of the Houthis, I think they would have stopped. And I'm saying this with an example in mind because the pro-Iran militias in Iraq started throwing rockets on our bases sometime after October 7, presumably in support of Hamas in Gaza. And what our reaction was to strike a few empty buildings of the militias or the RGC and on the border between Iraq and Syria, and they didn't stop. And then all of a sudden, we took out the top 3 commanders of Kataib Hezbollah militia, which is loyal to Iran, and they stopped. So you can see this at work. When these leaders are scared and hiding for their lives, they usually stop fighting. Except that for some reason,
I have to stop you here. We took out the commanders of Iraqi militias, we, the United States. How come we don't know? I've heard this, but a lot of people have
Yeah.
not heard this, that we're sitting here talking about how the United States does not go out and do forward thinking, like removing the problem. But in fact, we did that in Iraq. I'm going to give our I'm going to give our guys a
Yeah.
point. Okay.
Yeah. No, and I think we probably got the idea from the Israelis, We probably asked them and they said, do this. So now we know. Look, it's not a silver bullet, but
Right.
in situations like these, it substantially helps decline the amount, or the takes out the venom out of the attack of these militias on us, and forces them to sit back. Now, mind you, I think in the past there were people who advocated for doing this to the Iranian regime itself. If Khamenei himself feels threatened, if he himself cannot go out and lead the Friday prayer in Tehran and deliver the sermon, then he might have a different calculus. Um, but we're not. For some reason, we're not. And I think the reason we in the US don't do that is that there's a big battalion of naysayers who say that if we do this, there'll be doom and gloom in World War III, and Iran is really strong and powerful. I disagree. I don't think Iran is as fearsome, and we shouldn't really sit back and watch them do whatever they want. We should have them on their toes. I think that works.
Well, they're putting us on our toes. I just got 5 messages from people who are watching this program. One says there was a mass casualty shooting attack in Tel Aviv. That's a terror attack, actually in Jaffa. But several people wrote in to say Iranian missiles are on their way to Israel. So this was, I will tell those of you who are listening, this was Hussein's and my greatest fear, that while we're sitting here having a conversation, the rest of the war is going to start. So missiles have been launched by Iran. If you want to keep giving us updates, that would be good, because we're not going to turn away from you to look at our computer screens.
Oh, you sure? No, I mean, look, I'm not following any updates right now, but I can tell you what this means, because we were in the morning, we were thinking when we learned about these missiles, my first question was this choreographed by the Iranians, or will this be a surprise that our intel foiled? And apparently the Iranians themselves have told us that they're going to do this. So this is not a surprise, and this is not intel just breaking through and foiling it. So as long as this is the case, to me, this looks like the time that they attacked after Soleimani and the time that they attacked in April. So this is really choreographed. Now the question is, how much of these missiles can Israel shoot down and intercept and avoid civilian casualties or not? But in terms of politics, I wouldn't say that the Iranians have gone all out and now that they're going crazy over the killing of Nasrallah. This is to save face now that their big guy Nasrallah has been taken out, and the Lebanese expect them to do something, because the Lebanese are thinking, we're dying for you all the time, so maybe you should. And I've seen a few videos on social media by Hezbollah people in Lebanon just crying and cursing Iran and saying, when do you help us? When will you enter this war? So I think they're doing this to relieve pressure off of their, from their partisans and supporters. But I don't see this as going into a full-scale war, not yet. Now, the question here, what will Israel do in response? What will we do in response? I think that's
Well,
the big question.
we have said, the administration has said, that if Iran attacks Israel with missiles, Iran will pay a price, and we will ensure that it does. Our statement was very good. Now, do they follow that statement with action? Do they follow that statement by just telling Israel, okay, fine, you do it? We don't really know. The statement was good. And clearly, this was not a surprise attack. So I'm guessing that Israel is prepared in the best way that it can be for this. So people are still writing in, and that's fine. Keep updating me. But let me go back to one thing that I said I was going to raise with you again, because we can't do anything about this at the moment. We can just watch. So we mentioned Jordan, and you've mentioned Jordan. And so someone has asked, who first of all says to you, great overview, thank you. Tell us something about Iranian efforts in Jordan. This is really important because we often expect Jordan to behave, I don't know, like a sovereign country, but in fact, it's under enormous pressure from Iran, and that influences how the Jordanians behave. So what's going on in Jordan?
So Jordan is under immense pressure from Iran and its militias, and also it has some sort of domestic pressure. And I think the Jordanian monarch has so far played this as a balancing act. That's in his head. I think he can do a much better job in trying to lead his population instead of appeasing them. But that's different. But this said, he really faces an enormous threat from Iran, mainly through the northern borders of Jordan with Syria. This border has turned into a wild, wild west. All sorts of drugs and arms are crossing from Syria, from lawless Syria, from the area that the Iran militias control. They cross the Jordanian border. And from there, they go to the West Bank. Arms go to the West Bank. Drugs go to the West Bank, and drugs go everywhere else. They go through Jordan to the Gulf. So this has been a headache for the Jordanians, and they've been trying to fight it. And I understand that it's not easy. At the same time, you have all these Iranian proxy militias breathing down the neck of the Jordanian monarch. Now, mind you, the Iraqis right now do not really like they do not like the Jordanian monarch much because they blame him for being a friend of Saddam and they hated Saddam. So there's already bad blood. But what we see now is that a few militia characters in Iraq who support Iran, they've promised to go to Jordan and start their own militias and wage attacks from Jordan across the border with Israel. And of course, this is worrisome to the Israelis. This is worrisome. This should be worrisome to everyone. And whereas the Israelis, rightfully so, they were really unhappy about the statements that the king and the queen put out after October 7, they haven't yet abandoned the king. And the reason why they haven't abandoned the king is that the only other alternative is militias like Hezbollah and Hamas and all these guys. So I don't envy the king for where he stands. I think he's trying to just walk on the fence and try to do his best. And and of course he needs our support. It would have been nicer if his statements were nicer, or if he tried to lead his population instead of just playing along. But no complaints. I don't think this is our priority at this point. With Iraq and Lebanon and the RGC and Iran, I think we can keep Jordan on the back burner and keep on supporting the monarchy until things change.
So years ago, a long time ago now, I was in Jordan with a group of retired American military officers, and we were in Amman, and we went to see their security, their internal security. And the guy said to us, the weapons in Jordan point inward. And we're thinking, what do you mean they point inward? Pointing at Amman. He said, because weapons come into Jordan from Syria, from Lebanon, they come down into Jordan, and our job is to keep those weapons from getting to the West Bank. That's our job. We look inward, we stop them here because we don't want them over there, because over there we lose control of them. And I thought, well, that works. That's a responsible position. I don't think it's true anymore. But at the time, there was some hope that the Jordanians would be partners here. On the other hand, who can blame the king? If he's looking at the United States and saying, who's going to defend me? I don't think he thinks it's Washington.
But listen, I mean, in all fairness, the king has been combating cross-border illicit trade. I mean, but it hurts him first and foremost. All the drugs, the weapons that come in, some of them will go to the West Bank, but many of them might find their way to the hands of terrorists within Jordan. So this is not something, I mean, this is his own survival that's at stake.
Okay, so a couple of updates. A lot of stuff has been launched at Israel. Breaking news, Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 air defenses are now launching from Israel. The United States has said there would be serious consequences for this, like stuff that you need to know, right? One missile has been intercepted already. There are at least 100 Iranian missiles, they say, headed for Israel. So I'm not vetting the news here, but what I'm reading to you is from people that we know and that I trust. And so it seems that what you have is a very serious situation in Israel now. And the afternoon's going to be a long one for everybody. So that kind of takes us out of our path here. Are you checking your computer, Hussein?
I am.
Yeah,
I'm
good.
just quickly. The whole Israeli map looks like one big siren. There's sirens everywhere, and I think the number is 200 missiles
200.
from Iran to Israel. And now that the air defense has started working to shoot them down, and then the IDF says sirens sounded all across Israel. So every inch of the country is now under alert.
So here's the question that comes right from what you just said. Someone asks, is there enough Hezbollah ammunition left, enough missiles left, to try it from the other side so that Iran and Hezbollah are both shooting at Israel at the same time and maybe overwhelming Israeli air defenses? That's a good question.
Well, we're not sure how much. I've seen reports that what Hezbollah has now is 30% from what it had before the war started.
I'm sorry, how many? What's the percent?
30%.
30%.
So they retain 30% of what they had, and this is still a big number. If they had 150,000. Now on the upside, Israel has taken out a lot of generals who know how to use these missiles and rocket launchers, and this decreases their ability to use them. I think the only remaining missile threat comes mainly from Iran. These guys are intact and they can move their launchers and anywhere, and no one is putting them under any pressure. If the Iranians were scared that the minute they start moving their launchers around, there'll be fighter jets in the air that might take them out before they launch, then they probably would be under some pressure. But they're not. And this is the case, by the way, for Hezbollah. One of the problems of Hezbollah is that whenever they start moving the launchers, IDF drones picks it up. The minute they see it, they go after it. This is not the case in Iran. Iran is still, free to do whatever it wants to do.
For the moment,
For the moment, yes.
For the moment. And this raises, of course, the question of what the United States will do. Apparently, we've warned them. There will be severe consequences. There will be. I don't know.
Look, on this point, I hope that we live up to the word severe consequences because all our severe consequences have been hitting empty military buildings or weapon depots or something. So I want severe to be severe, like taking out vital, something that they like, that they will miss when we take it out. We'll see.
So as they say, from your mouth to God's ears, right? Maybe we will live up to ourselves. Right. We're coming close to when we have to wrap up. And I know that you want to sit there in front of your computer, and so do I. We want to pay attention to this. But we have just a couple more things, if you don't mind, just one or two. You can do short
of course, yes.
answers. So somebody wants us to turn our attention back to Lebanon. How about that? And he asks, with the failure of UN Resolution 1701, and I think everybody at this point agrees that it has failed, do you think that Israel needs to stay in southern Lebanon, that it's going to end up? I mean, they did that once before. Are they going to stay in southern Lebanon?
So there's a resolution that's much better than 1701. Not many people talk about it, and it is included under 1701. It's called 1559, and this resolution instructs the disarmament and disbanding of all militias, including Hezbollah in Lebanon. And I think this should be the headline that the Lebanese government and the world should push for. If Hezbollah does not disband, I think Israel will have to take a buffer zone. Now, again, this is different from what Israel had until the year 2000. There will not be Lebanese who live under Israeli governance or control. This will be an empty landmined land, no man's land, with drones on top, just a dead territory. Now, the Lebanese can get this territory back the minute they disband Hezbollah. If they don't, then, this is the arrangement that will be until further notice.
So this raises another question. When you look at Hezbollah forces, and you said, they still have elite forces in their operating, what percentage of that would you say are Lebanese people who joined Hezbollah because they want to do that? And what percent are people that have come into Lebanon, sent by Iran or coming across from Syria? who are not Lebanese. So if you talk about disbanding Hezbollah, are we talking about sending Lebanese people home to their houses, or are we talking about getting people out of Lebanese territory?
So I'd say the foreign fighters would be a minimum here. And the reason I say that is because this is guerrilla war. And in guerrilla, you need people who know the terrain, who know the population, who know the language, who know, if you get someone who's, say, from Afghanistan, a Shia from Afghanistan, and then, the Iranians have an Afghani militia. I mean, this guy wouldn't be able to talk to other people, doesn't know the terrain, doesn't know where's Israel and where's Lebanon. So this would be a disadvantage. I say at this point, manpower is not an issue for the Hezbollahis. The issue is that how much of this manpower is as ideological as it should be, how much of it is doing this out of conviction, and how many of those fighters are doing it because they're being paid to do it. Now, the minute that they start doing this for being paid, this gives, and apparently we've seen this unfold in real time, this gives Israel an enormous access to intelligence. You can start penetrating, and it probably when Hezbollah was a smaller militia, penetrating it was much harder. But after the Syria war, when it transformed itself into an army-like militia, secrets become hard in an army. I mean, you can find their generals wherever they go. So this is what has helped Israel to just pick them out one after another. And I think in the south, what you see now, these are elite force fighters, many of them ideological. But the point is, they're not sure in which direction they're going. So, okay, they're fighting Israelis, trying to hold them off. They will probably die. But then what? If Nasrallah's gone, and what's the point of all this fight? So I think they're demoralized at the time, and Israel certainly has the momentum.
So people who listen to this program know that when it's time to close, I always like to end with a question, the answer to which is optimistic. And I think you've preempted me, because it seems to me fairly optimistic to say that if you can take away the trappings of Hezbollah, which is to say their rockets and their missiles and their money, and we've tried to curtail their money, we have not done very well about it. They're all over the world, and they do drugs, and they run guns, and they do all kinds of things that make money outside of Lebanon. People of Lebanon get none of that, but that's okay. But if you cut off their outside supplies, it may be that Lebanese people say to themselves, this is not the future. It's not where I want to go. Is that what we take away when we say that's a hopeful thought?
Well, I'd say Israel is in a good place militarily. So it's unlikely that Israel will get defeated or will lose these wars. It will probably win. What Israel needs is the support, especially the diplomatic support of the United States. Israel cannot really talk to all these capitals and crack a deal and come to a ceasefire or whatever truce with Lebanon. The United States has to be involved and has to be on board with the Israeli thinking, because military and diplomacy should go hand in hand. We can't have them each on one side of the table. And it's unfortunate that the U.S., maybe because we're in an election year, but we haven't been doing this as we should in support and in coordination. So on a hopeful note, let's hope that this statement, other statements, teach this administration that there's no way out of this except that we have to support Israel diplomatically and otherwise until so that the Israeli victory can be translated into something that's good in real life and politics.
Something that's good for the people of the region, not just Israel.
Of course,
Syria,
everyone.
Lebanon, Iraq, all
of
of them.
course. And just one last word. I hear people saying ceasefire all the time. I say I oppose ceasefire. I support peace. So we're the ones who are pushing for peace.
I like it. I'll take it. So we're going to close the program here, and I'd like to say to anybody who is listening today, you need to tune in next week and listen again, because now you've heard a lot about where the Arab world is, where Israel's neighbors are, what's kind of going on. But next week we have Avi Meir, who some of you know as the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post until recently. Some of you follow him on Twitter. He's got like 2.5 million followers. He is going to talk to us about what's happening in Israel, what the social atmosphere is in Israel, how Israelis feel, what the stresses are in Israel. So if you picked up a lot of information today, which I know you did, about the Arab world, come back next week and we're going to talk about Israel. And Hussain Abdul Hussain, this was amazing. This was just
Thank you. Thank you,
truly
Shoshana. Thank you
amazing
very
and
much.
enlightening, mostly positive, not altogether
Yeah.
positive, but I think we can feel a little bit better as we go back to our computers and see what's happening. Thank you very much. Come
Thank
again.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye.